The revolution spread to France after French Revolution in 1789. It means agrarian revolution after started in Netherlands gradually spread to France after the French Revolution in 1789. Then to Italy, Germany and Russia. After spreading French, these nations like Italy, Germany and Russia, agrarian revolution took place. Example, in Russia, after the Bolshevik Revolution in 1917, agrarian revolution came into being. So after looking those explanation about agrarian revolution, let's see the major changes during agrarian revolution. Means we have to look on the changes that took place during the agrarian revolution. The first change was application of scientific methods in agriculture. It means during the feudal modes of production, there were no scientific methods in farming. But after agrarian revolution, scientific methods applied. For example, the invention of machines like jet rotor, seed drills, and seed harvesters were discovered during that time. So that marked the agrarian revolution to come into being. And various scientists come up to invest various machines apart from those what I have mentioned in order to ensure that agriculture is growing faster and bring the changes in the agrarian revolution during that time in Europe. And the second change which took place during agrarian revolution was mechanization. Mechanization means in agriculture occurred the use of machines in production that replaced the human labor. It means that during the agrarian revolution, the machines replaced the use of human in production that increased the quality and the quantity of products in agriculture. And that factor led to the need of demand of those products to be high, and the population increased because the machines have been used in production. And those machines which were invested during that time accelerated the production of fertilization, of fertilizer that were used in agriculture. Hence, the second point of mechanization was the change that happened during the agrarian revolution. The third change during agrarian revolution was enclosure system. Enclosure system, what does it mean? Enclosure system, it means the collection or joining together or amalgamating the divided small strips of the land to be the one land or the one plantation or farm. So during agrarian revolution, the people who came to practice that system come up with an idea to collect the strips of the land which were divided during the feudal modes of production in order to make the large land or large farm for large scale agriculture. So enclosure system made those peasants, serfs or tenants and landlords to evict their lands and make that land to be the one plantation. And that enclosure system that started during the 16th century after the agrarian revolution came into being, and enclosure system has come to be known as the changes or change that happened during the agrarian revolution. The another change, it is land reclamation. Land reclamation, it means that the turning up the uncultivated or unarable into arable or useful land. For example, the area that were comprised marshes and dried land were turned to be irrigated, and those marsh land were turned to be useful in agriculture or farming. Means the land for cultivation of agricultural products and area for sheep rearing and cattle rearing increased, that marked the agrarian revolution by that time. So after that, of changing the unuseful land to be useful land or unarable land to be arable land, led to the increase of production. And as production increased, the population increased because people got food to be fed, got products that could be used in other business like trade, and other products like cotton, wool that you used to produce clothes that were consumed by the people. So land reclamation took place, for example, in Netherlands. And geography, we saw it, that land reclamation took place in Netherlands, where different areas which were comprised with marshes and the dried areas were turned to be in use due to the agrarian revolution and the change which they came with at their major polis to take place during that era. Another change was privatization of land into land capital. In which sense? It means that after agrarian revolution, the merchants and the merchants together with the leaders of a particular area discussed that the land that were owned by the landlords and those small strips of the land which were owned by tenants, serfs, and peasants must be evicted to be given to the merchants, those who were invested in agriculture or modern agriculture. So those landlords decided to sell off their lands, and those tenants and peasants decided to move from those lands and search for labor in working for those large plantations that were established by the merchants who established large plantations. So privatization of land into land capital was another change that occurred during agrarian revolution. And another change that happened during agrarian revolution was the use of scientific breeding. Scientific breeding, it means that there were a selection of seeds and animals. For example, sheep were close together to bring the sheep which will produce more products as were supposed to produce for various products for using in industries like wools, cotton, for production of clothes. In scientific breeding, seeds were closed, like as we studied in biology, that pairs were closed together and bring the seeds which were more productive as they supposed to produce for various consumption, like products that were produced during that time were meant for various purposes, like food consumption industrial products production, and others. And the last but not least was commodity production. We have to remember that during the feudal modes of production, that products that were produced were meant for substantial consumption. But after agrarian revolution, the products which were produced were meant for sales or for commerce. It means those words, cotton, milk, meat, or fresh milk and meat that were produced during that time were for sale. And these products which were produced accelerated to trade to be done by that time and increased the population, because there is enough food to feed the population, there is enough products and raw materials to feed their industries like textile industries and wooden industries which were established during that time because there were abundant raw materials. After looking into the changes or major changes during agrarian revolution, let us see the causes of agrarian revolution in Europe. The first one was development of science and technology. Causes of agrarian revolution was the development of science and technology. In which sense? In the sense that during agrarian revolution came up with different scientists and engineers who came up with different machines and tools which were modern and advanced for agricultural purpose, like jethro tool that were comprised harvest machine and seed drill machine that were invented by various scientists. And in this course of agrarian revolution, that is development of science and technology, there are scientific methods which were used during agrarian revolution, like the use of fertilizers, because the invention led to the discovery of various machines that were producing fertilizers, and that fertilizers were used in plantations and farms for production, and that which will lead to high yield harvesting. The second cause of agrarian revolution was growth of population. As we have seen that the production was increased and the food or products has been increased. So what we expect? The population will be high because there is abundant food to feed that population. There is enough raw materials that were used to produce various products or finished goods like clothes and others which were being consumed by the people. So, for example, in the growth of population, we take example from Britain, where in 1715 the population was almost 5 million, but after 1815 the population doubled into 10 million, and in Germany the population was doubled from 7 million to 14 million of people in population, and that population had different effects, like the increase of market for those materials which were made and the consuming of other products like agricultural products. The another cause of agrarian revolution was expansion of domestic and external market. The cause of agrarian revolution was expansion of domestic and external market, or internal and external market was expanded. In which sense? Domestic market, it means the people were increased in Britain and other European nations. That made the market to be possible. Means the people are high and products are being produced, so people will consume that product. That will lead to the purchasing power to increase because there is enough population that supports market. And for external market, we look on the outside of Europe. For example, in Africa, many industrial finished goods were transported from Europe to other areas like in Africa, America, and India or Asia at large, where people from those areas were consuming ready-made goods from Europe because production was increased and the supply of that material were high. So what they decided to do, those merchants, they decided to transport those goods to other areas to search for market of their ready-made products or goods. Another cause of agrarian revolution was high demand of English wool. The high need or high demand of English wool was needed in production of clothes or thick clothes in order to go with the climatic condition of that area. As we know, in Europe, the climatic condition of that area is different as it is in Africa, because here it is hot, or in Africa it is hot, but there is condition that need people to put on thick clothes like that. So English wool were produced at large extent to ensure that the woolen industries must get the sufficient raw materials or wool for production of thick clothes, which were consumed in different areas, in domestic areas like Europe, specifically Britain, France, Netherlands, and external like in Asia, because in Asia there is climate conditions similar like in Europe. And another cause of agrarian revolution was primitive accumulation of capital. This was another cause of agrarian revolution. In which sense? In the sense that during agrarian revolution and before agrarian revolution, the merchants decided that we have to collect enough capital in order to invest in different economic activities. So they decided to use plundering and looting methods or ways in order to get different strategies or capital. They used the plundering and looting to collect capital, and they used the pirates, maybe in sea. The pirates, they attacked the ships which were traveling in the sea, and they evicted their materials, and those materials acted as the source of capital. After seeing the primitive accumulation of capital, there is another cause, which is the demand of fresh milk and meat. As the population increased, the demand of food was increased also. So meat and meat was needed. So there is a need of high layering of sheep and cattle. So milk and meat were needed to feed the population that increased. For example, in England or Britain, which doubled from 5 million to 10 million. So you can see that population was increased, and those stuffs were needed to feed that population that has been grown. Another cause was development of social infrastructure. Social infrastructures. For example, roads, railways, banks, insurance companies, and so many. In which sense? These roads were used to transport laborers from their homes to productive centers. Those roads were used to transport raw materials from the productive areas to the industrial areas, and at the same time those roads were used to transport the supervisors of those industries or laborers at large to the productive areas. As the same as railways were used to transport goods and raw materials from productive areas to industrial areas and to the market. Banks. The banks, as we know, this is the major capital provider to those merchants. The banks were providing loans to the merchants to ensure that they get enough capital to invest in large plantations and will employ the enough or sufficient labor to produce the needed raw materials for industries, enough foods for feeding the population, and other stuffs. So those banks like Barclays banks, Amsterdam Bank, railways, insurance companies which were emerged during that time, given the loans to the merchants to ensure that the investment is possible and they will not go bankrupt or got financial crisis. Another cause of agrarian revolution was weakness of feudal mode of production. As we have seen in the last explanation that feudal modes of production undergone different problems. So its weakness gave the room or the chance for agrarian revolution to take place, because the feudal mode of production were used the crude tools in production, the tradition or poor method of cultivation or farming. So after the coming to being of agrarian revolution, scientific and modern methods of farming were applied that made agrarian revolution to come into being. We have seen the causes of agrarian revolution, which are almost 8, but not the 8 points. There is many, but I have mentioned the few. So after looking at that, let us see the enclosure system. It is just a term which you have to know. You have to understand what is enclosure system and what was comprised in that system. Enclosure system refer to the system where land that was formerly for feudal lords, serfs, and peasants was joined for commercial agriculture and sheep rearing for wool production from Flanders, people of Belgium and Dutch. It means that the enclosure system involved the joining together those strips of lands which were divided during the feudal modes of production, and to make the one land or the large land which will be supervised by the emerging merchants who have invested in large plantation in order to make large scale agriculture to take place. That's the meaning of enclosure system. Enclosure system, it means to enclose something, to join together, to bring together something and to make the one. So that's the meaning of enclosure system. After looking the definition of enclosure system, where the land were joined together to make the large plantation. So we have to see that where enclosure system took place. The enclosure system took place between 16th century up to 18th century. So we see 2 centuries. Let us see the reasons for adoption of enclosure system. The enclosure system was triggered by various reasons. The first one was the need to increase the production of raw materials. Enclosure system was done in order to increase the production of raw materials which were needed in industries, in textile industries and woolen industries. For example, cotton, which were needed in textile industries, and wool, which were needed in woolen industries. So those raw materials to be in high demand to their industries increased the strategy to adapt of enclosure system in Europe. Another reason for adoption of enclosure system, development of science and technology. After the development of science and technology, the Americans decided to adopt the enclosure system because for the reason of getting the enough rent for practicing different agricultural practice and a large area to apply scientific methods of agriculture. Another reason for adoption of enclosure system was demographic revolution. Demographic revolution was done due to the increase of population in Europe. So enclosure system aimed to make those people or self or tenants to migrate from their rents and find the area where they will get the jobs, or they will save their labor to produce for merchants. Another reason was expansion of towns and cities. After the expansion of towns and cities, merchants together with their parliaments or leaders decided to adopt enclosure system in order to get the land for arrangement of towns and the city or urbanization in their areas. So people were supposed to migrate from their areas and to search for another area where they will settle. So that led to enclosure system to be adapted. And the last one was the need to establish commercial production. During the feudal modes of production, there were substantial production which aimed for substantial consumption or human consumption. But during the Agrarian Revolution meant for commercial purpose, in which the products which were produced aimed for commerce or sale. So this is where the reasons for adoption of enclosure system during Agrarian Revolution. There is a question here. Assess the problems that face the open field system. It means that you have to explain the problems that face the agriculture during the open field system. And the answers of this question we have explained during the beginning of this lesson, where I have mentioned that among the problems which face the open field system was low production. The another problem that faced the open field system was the clash between feudalots and peasants, and another one was was poor agricultural methods in farming, and other points that I have mentioned in the explanation. So this is the question which you have to ask yourself and get the answer.
Purchase your tracks today.